Hi, welcome back to my studio. I'm Barbara Swift and you're watching BSwiftArt. In today's video, we're going to do a loose gladiolus flower, which is the flower for the month of August when this video is being filmed. We're going to do a wet on wet technique, and we're also going to do a lot of splatters and just have fun with it. This is it right here. Hope you can see that. All right, are you ready to paint? Let's go. Today I'm going to use my Arches 140 pound 100% cotton watercolor paper, and I'm also going to use a pretty large brush, number 14. It's a Skoda Ultimo is the name of it. Nice brush. It's softer. It doesn't have a lot of spring to it, but it's nice because it holds a lot of water, thus it holds a lot of paint. So it's good for making these loose kind of florals where you just want to slap around the leaves without any drawing on the paper first. We're just gonna let it do its own thing and just kind of play, just kind of having fun. Nothing too serious here. So we're just going to make individual petals as we make a long stem of gladiolus flowers and some buds at the top. So I'm just kind of thinking about what color I want it to be. I really love those peachy pink ones. They are the flower for August, as I said, and that's my birthday month, so I have always loved the gladiolus. My mom used to grow them out in her yard, so they're pretty easy to grow. They get very tall, and when you cut them down, they're probably about 3 feet tall, and they make a very dramatic presentation when you put them all together in a bouquet. They're very fluffy flowers, but they can look very contemporary because their stems are quite thick, and then all the flowers come off of the one stem. So I'm going to do kind of like an S, almost a backwards S shape. I like to do a lot of curves when I do my florals so that they don't stack up on top of each other or directly side by side. So we're just going to start on the bottom. That will help me with my spacing so I don't run out of space as I go. And I have a pretty weak solution of vermilion, which is a pinky red. Not red, it's orange, I'm sorry. But yeah, it's a pinky orange, and I'm using Mission Gold Magello paints today. They have a lot of pigment in them. They're very nice paints. So that's what I have in my little tray here, and I like this little palette because I can fit it in the camera so you can see what colors I'm using. So I'm just lightly touching the paper, pushing down, and then lightly bringing it back up with the paintbrush, and that makes that little point there. So it's light pressure, heavy pressure, light pressure, and that'll naturally kind of curve it and point it at the end. All my petals are facing towards the very center, so you have one point and you want them all to end up at that same point. So it's like an imaginary point. So I lightly touch, push down, and then bring it up lightly with no pressure. And then you can take the tip of the brush and shape it however you want it to. Some gladiolus are very ruffly on the edges. Some of them are smoother. It depends on the variety. We're going to have a combination of ruffly and smooth on this one here. So those are all my center petals. There's 3 center petals, and then there's 3 outer petals. So I'm going to start doing the outer petals here. I'm going to leave a little bit of white in between the petals so that they don't all run together. And I'm using a lighter mixture of my paint. So I put more water in my paint, and that'll make it more transparent, more lighter. So that's just painting those 3 petals all the way around the outside. So wherever 2 petals meet, that's the center of my bottom petal, if that makes sense. There, so I'm just going to add a little bit more onto that one. And then I'm starting on the third one over here. So this flower is looking directly straight on towards us. And now I'm going to go get my quinacridone deep rose. And same thing, kind of a watered down solution. And just kind of drop it in. Just drop it in. Let the water do its thing. Water in the paint. Because wherever there is water, the paint will follow. So I am trying to mix them about the same amount of water and paint. And then I'm just dropping it in. Or you could use thicker paint too. But if you make it too thin, it won't show up too much. And it'll make a bloom. Which I really like blooms. They're really pretty. That's where the paint gets pushed away. So if you watch some of my other videos, you'll know what I'm talking about. But we'll have some in here too. So I'm sure we will. We always do. If you don't want blooms, then you paint a different way. But this wet on wet is what we're doing now. Just dropping them in. So with the loose watercolor, you don't have to pay attention to a lot of details. It's just giving you the idea of what it is without having to go and paint too many details, too many shadows. It's just fun. It's fun to play. Play with all your colors, play with your brushes, see what you have. I'm going to go a little bit darker in the center. By going darker in the center, it gives the illusion that it's cupped in like a funnel, like the center of the flower would be. And that's where all the stamens will come out. So I'm just taking that quinacridone deep rose and just putting that in the center there. Quinacridone permanent rose is what I'm using. Okay, now we're going to move on to the next flower. Going to be 4 flowers and 2 buds. So I'm doing the 3 petals same way as I did the bottom ones. They can go in any direction that you want them to. And then the 3 outer petals, and this one overlaps that one, so I'm just going to let them touch and then come back in with that quinacridone permanent rose and add a little dab of color, a little dab of that pink, rosy pink. There's my bloom. I knew I'd get a bloom. No problem. All you do is dry your brush off a little bit and you can just spread it out. Sometimes they look good, but if it's in a place that you don't like, you can just spread it out before it dries. So you always got to watch as your paint's drying to see what it's doing on you. But here we're going to go for a 3rd flower. Now see how I'm putting them kind of in a C shape there? So they're not stacked right on top of each other or right next to each other side by side. It's kind of more of a zigzag. So the first one and the second one are stacked a little bit, but it goes off to one side. And then once you put the stem in, it won't be stacked because the stem goes from the right corner to the left corner, diagonal across the page. So then I'm going to go for my 4th flower. Same thing where it touched the other one. I'm just going to go ahead and let them touch, and those colors will start to blend together. And a little bit darker in the center. Sorry, my little light there is giving a little glare on the paper, but you can see how wet it is. It's wet on wet. A couple little buds, one there, one there. There we go. And now I think it's time to determine where my stems are going to be. So I'm just taking some of my yellow-green. Always start with your lightest color, and then you can work your way up to the darker colors. But start with the lighter ones. It's a lot easier to add dark than it is to take it away. So I'm just putting a little sap green in there to give it a little variation. And then I'm letting that green touch the bottom of those buds and letting it bleed right into the buds. I like it when they do that. And a couple leaves. So just putting some leaves coming out from the bottom. And I'm using my Hooker's green. So I'm going to have a few greens in here. You don't have to use every color on your palette, but I do generally use a lot of the greens that it's on the palette and mix it up a bit. So I'm going ahead and put some yellow green on top of that, brighten it up a bit. And then that third leaf. That one's pretty good, I guess. We'll leave that one. So now I'm grabbing my number 4 round brush. And we're going to start layering now. So I'm going to come in and define the petals a little bit of the shape of the petals where they overlap the other petals. I'm going to try to define them with my lights and darks. So I'm using that quinacridone rose. And if it gets too dark, you just take your little bit of toilet tissue and dab it up. I use the single ply toilet tissue to wipe up if it gets too wet because it doesn't leave an imprint. This is the cheap stuff. I think it's Scott 1000, and it doesn't have like a quilted pattern because believe it or not, if you dab it with that, sometimes that little quilt pattern makes a little impression there and then it's there forever. Charmin. So I'm just drawing some of those veins that are in the petals. The petals are kind of crepey texture, and then they have veins in them. Not as strong as a leaf. They're softer than a leaf would be, but you can see them if you really look at it. So I'm just kind of painting in some of those veins. It's just giving me lights and darks. I'm trying to make it darker towards the center and just leaving some of the highlights from underneath poking through. And then that helps to separate the flowers and the petals also. So here I've left the flower on the bottom, that petal a little lighter, and then the one behind it, I made it a little darker because that would be in shadow. But we're not really shading as much, but leave that edge light right there just to give it a separation. And we'll move on and do the same thing to all the flowers, making that dark center. And this flower here curves a little bit more than the other ones. So you can see when I'm making these little marks on my petals, I'm curving it with the shape of the petal. Letting it curve away from the center. That's a good example right there. It's curving away from that center. And I'm going back and putting some more dark in there while it's still wet. If you do it while it's wet, those edges will soften and diffuse a little bit. And when you do it once it's dry, there'll be a hard edge. So I like to do it while it's still damp but not sopping wet. And we'll put some of those little marks in the petals up here in the last flower. And keeping that light edge on the top flower petal and dark behind it to lift it off of the flower behind it. You lift that petal. And I'll come down here. Now this one's already dry, and you can see how it leaves more of a defined, sharp line when you go ahead and paint on top of it. So I'm going to do the same thing to all of my flowers. Now that they're getting dry, that one's still a little damp. I would like that look better. So there's things that I'm not loving about this painting at this moment. I'm not really getting the effect that I want to, and I'm trying to keep darkening it, but I think I waited too long on some of them, and I don't like that too stripy of a look, so I'm going to change gears. I think what I'm going to do now is I'm going to paint this more graphically, if you know what I mean. Not going for realism, not really going for that really watery, loose watercolor look at this point. I'm going to go ahead and paint this more graphic, as if it was on merchandise or something like that. And then I'm going to outline it with my micron markers. So sometimes things don't always go the way you intended, but if you're able to pivot and shift a little bit, you can still get a nice painting out of it. Here's my micron. I like the micron pens because they are pigment pens, and that means that they are going to last a little bit longer, just like your watercolors will last. They're acid free. And I'm just drawing around all of my petals now. I'm adding a few little waves and ruffles in there, and I can just draw whatever I want. You don't have to follow the lines. You're just using that painted flower as a guideline. So I'm just painting them. So if the edge isn't how I want it, I make it how I want it with my pen. It's just doodling. If you like to doodle, you love this technique. Never stop painting just because it's not turning out the way you like it. Just keep on going, see what happens. The worst thing that can happen is you still don't like it, right? But if you keep on going, it might turn into something halfway decent. So just keep trying, keep going with it. Okay, so now I'm going to get my number 5 micron, which is a lot finer than the 12, because I want to do some doodling on those petals. I want to make all those veins in those petals stand out now. So I've got a little collection of half dried up markers that still work a little bit that I should just throw out, but I don't know why I don't. I'm going to get a brand new one here. Okay, so we'll get going with the new one. There, that's much better. Yeah, so you want that ink to be flowing really nice. And I'm using the colors that are underneath now in my underpainting kind of as a guideline for these little marks that I'm making on top of the flower. So I'm just drawing in that texture that's in the petal. And following the shape of the petal, the curves in the petal. I'm just drawing right over what I've painted there, like that. And I like that, so I think I might be able to rescue this painting after all. So there's always a center vein kind of down the very center. It almost looks like there was a fold and you opened it up and now it's just soft. So that's what's in the center of each of these petals. So I start with that. I'll draw that vein in first and then go from the inside out. And then wherever I have some darker lines, I'm just kind of outlining them. Put a couple folds in my leaf. There we go. And just keep on going. Sometimes, you know, they say less is more, but sometimes more is better too. So we're just keep adding more. Like I said, the worst thing that can happen is you don't like it. And if you didn't like it before you started, then you didn't lose anything except a piece of paper. It's fun and you always learn. You learn something from every time you do a painting. Always learning. And that's what's great about art and painting and most things in life. The more you do it, the more you practice, the more you learn. You don't always end up with a masterpiece, but you always end up with knowledge. So I'm going to go ahead and finish up this last flower in the same way. My mom used to grow gladiolus in the garden. They grow pretty tall. They're probably about 4 foot tall. And once you cut them, you know, you have this really big, long stem with all these flowers on them, and they start opening up at the bottom of the stem, and then at the top of the stem, it's just buds. So it kind of gradually is wide open flowers, and then some that are partially open, and as you go up the stem. And they're August flower of the month. One of them, Poppy, is another one. And I think I want to just add some yellow, make this a little bit more happy. Like the sun is shining on it and it's all bright and cheerful. So I'm going to add some yellow wherever I think the sun might hit those petals. Happy sunny yellow. Yeah, just a little dab will do ya. And I'll put some on the top petal. See, that also helps to separate those two petals by putting it on the edge of the one that's on top, and the one that's underneath leave a little bit more dull. Okay, so there I have that, but it looks like it needs a little bit more to me, so why not? Let's keep drawing. So I got my number 5 still, and I think I'm going to just draw in a branch, very basic stem with the buds on it. So I'll get one of my markers that works. I should just get rid of those ones that don't. But no, I just put them back, didn't I? Okay, so there's one of the buds, and I'm going to bring it down and put the stem in. There's the stem, and go ahead and put a little bud right there. Add another one there. And finish the stem. And I'll continue it up here. We'll put another bud right here. Okay. And then bring that stem down. Little bud there. And I'll have another branch over here that has its own little flowers there. There's part of a leaf. And then in front of it is some more of those buds, but they're not going to show. They're still all in the green. The other ones are, you know, the flowers are just starting to peek out as those little green leaves kind of float away from them. That big leaf over here. There. Now I'm looking at it thinking, I think it's going to need some color. I wasn't going to color it. I was just going to leave it as a line drawing in the background, which could be really nice. But I decided to go ahead because I can't help myself. Can't stop sometimes. But I think it's going to turn out good. So I'm just going to go ahead and put some color. So I'm putting that vermilion and then the Quin Rose on top of that. And then I'm going to start with my sap green, really watered down. I want to make this light and less detail, but I still want to drop some color in it. But I want that main stem of gladiolus to be the feature of the painting. I don't want to overwhelm it, so this branch is definitely secondary. So first branch, number 1. And I'll just dab in a light wash of color here. And that's a little bit of sap green. Put a little bit more on top of there. When you layer it, it makes it a little darker. It's almost like stacking glass, like Coke bottles or something. And if you looked at it, you know, wherever it's stacked, it would be darker. And wherever it's just single layer, it would be lighter. Same with watercolor. You can paint over it and it'll be a little bit darker, like you stack the colors. Okay, I could leave it like that, but I didn't. I went and I put a background in. Unfortunately, I did not film this part, but I wanted to come back and show you what I did. So I just put blues and purples in the background And then I splashed it with water like I'm showing you there. And wherever I splashed it with water, you kind of get those little blooms in the back. And then I did some splashes with the Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White, and also some of that quinacridone rose. And then I did some work with my quill. I put a little bit of this Bleed Proof White in my quill. See how I drew those stamens in there? I did that with the quill. I love this little trick. So there's a lot of watery paint still in the center, so I'm just going to dip it in. And then see, you can just draw it just like you would using a pen. It makes it so easy. A lot easier for me than doing it with the brush. I'm not really good with that fine work with my brush. So this, I love this little idea here. And that's also how I sign my name. I just used a darker blue and, you know, put that thicker paint, kind of like the consistency of milk, and put that thicker paint in there and sign my name. So here's a close-up, how it looks. And I think it turned out pretty good. See, I was ready to give up on it, and in the end, I ended up liking it. So I hope you liked this video. I hope that it inspires you to just get your paint out and start playing and have some fun with it. And it might turn out, might not, but it's just paper. It's just paper. Yeah, so thank you so much for watching my video, and thank you for all of those who have subscribed. I appreciate it so much. If you've gotten something out of my video, go ahead and press that subscribe button, press the like, and then that little bell is for notifications, so it'll tell you when I put out a new video. So have peace and love until we meet again, and be creative, be bold, be swift art. Thanks a lot. See you next time. Bye-bye.